The Tuscan sun beat down, gilding the endless rows of vines. I was here for work, seeking stories amid echoes of war, but I found something more unexpected under this intense blue sky. My name is Elena, a journalist. I covered conflicts where adrenaline was my only vice. Now, this vineyard seemed like a mirage of peace, though a different tension was starting to vibrate in the air. And then I saw him. Marco. A soldier on leave, or so he said. His uniform seemed out of place amidst so much natural beauty, but his eyes told stories no chronicle could capture. Our gazes met over the green leaves. It was just an instant, but charged with static electricity. As if we recognized in each other a similar thirst, a similar wound. He approached, with that tense calm of someone who has seen too much. Lost? He asked. His voice was deep, with a hint of irony that made me smile inwardly. Searching, I replied. We talked. About nothing and everything. About the wine maturing on the vines, the heavy silence of the countryside, so different from the shrapnel-laden silence we both knew well. There was something in his presence, a solidity that contrasted with my own internal restlessness. I wore a ring on my finger, a reminder of a stable life that now felt distant. Marco didn't ask about the ring. His eyes seemed to see beyond it, straight into that part of me that longed to escape, even if just for a moment stolen from the Tuscan sun. He offered me a taste of wine directly from the barrel, in the cool, dark cellar. The air changed instantly, becoming dense, heavy with the scent of damp wood and fermentation. The wine was strong, full-bodied. I felt it warm my throat and slide down, igniting more than just my palate. My cheeks flushed, and not just from the alcohol. His fingers brushed against mine as he passed me the improvised glass. A fleeting touch, perhaps accidental, but it sent an electric current straight to my core. I swallowed hard, trying to hide it. The dimness of the cellar enveloped us, creating an artificial, dangerous intimacy. I could hear his breathing, feel the heat emanating from his body so close to mine. This wine holds secrets, he whispered, his warm breath brushing my ear. Like all of us, I suppose. His closeness was overwhelming, tempting. I looked up, meeting the depth of his brown eyes. There was a question in them, a silent invitation to leave the rules behind for a moment. My heart was racing, a war drum in the midst of Tuscan peace. The line between right and desired blurred with each passing second. He closed the distance. He didn't touch me, but his presence was a caress in itself. The air crackled. I could smell the faint scent of gunpowder mixed with his cheap cologne. Sometimes, he said, his voice barely a murmur, the best stories are the ones left untold. His eyes flickered down to my lips for an instant. And then, I broke the spell. Or perhaps I just transformed it. I have to go back, I said, my voice sounding strangely firm. I have things to do. I lied. Marco didn't insist. He just nodded slowly, a shadow of understanding, or perhaps disappointment, crossing his weathered face. The vineyard is large. Maybe we'll cross paths again. I left the cellar almost running, back into the blinding sunlight. The contrast was brutal. Outside, everything was clear and defined. Inside, the shadows invited getting lost. I leaned against a warm stone wall, trying to calm my breathing. The ring on my finger seemed to weigh a ton. What the hell was I doing? The following days were a game of cat and mouse. We ran into each other by chance among the vines, at the small trattoria in the village, by the ancient fountain. Each encounter was a small electric shock. Glances held a second longer than necessary, knowing smiles that needed no words, accidental touches that were hardly accidental. We talked more. About his missions, omitting the horrors but hinting at the scars. About my articles, the frustration of telling half-truths to avoid discomfort. I discovered that beneath the tough soldier facade, there was a man with an unexpected sensitivity to the ephemeral beauty of that landscape. A fascinating contrast. And he seemed to see in me more than just the journalist looking for a story. He saw the woman trapped between duty and a desire growing like the vines around us. One afternoon, the storm that had been threatening for days finally broke. The sky darkened suddenly, and heavy drops began to hit the dry leaves on the ground. We took refuge in a small abandoned chapel on top of the hill. It smelled of damp stone, old dust, and the electricity of the storm outside, and the one inside. The sound of the rain was deafening. We were trapped, isolated from the world in that small sacred space desecrated by our palpable tension. Marco took off his wet jacket. Underneath, he wore a simple dark t-shirt that clung to his muscular torso. I couldn't stop my gaze from lingering for a moment. He turned and caught me looking. I didn't look away this time. I held his gaze, a silent challenge, an implicit surrender. "Elena," he began to say, but his voice broke slightly. He took a step towards me. The space between us shrank 2 inches, to a breath. He raised a hand, slowly, as if afraid of scaring me. His knuckles brushed my cheek. His skin was rough, calloused, but the touch was incredibly gentle. I closed my eyes instinctively, leaning my face into his touch. A shiver ran down my spine. It was surrendering to the inevitable, to what we both had been avoiding. His lips found mine. It wasn't a stolen kiss, it was an encounter agreed upon in silence days ago. It was gentle at first, a recognition, a testing of waters. But soon the accumulated need, the contained tension, exploded. The kiss deepened, became hungry. My hands sought the nape of his neck, tangling in his short, damp hair. His arms wrapped around me, pressing me against his strong body. I could feel every tense muscle beneath the damp t-shirt, his heartbeat against mine. The outside world, the storm, my ring, my other life, everything disappeared. Only this moment existed, this taste of wine and danger, this brutal connection. His kisses trailed down my neck, leaving a fiery path on my skin. I gasped, arching my back, offering him more. Logic had left the building. His hands explored my back, my hips, with a mixture of urgency and reverence. He knew the terrain of combat, but seemed to navigate my body with a different precision. I pulled back for a moment to breathe, to look into his eyes. I saw pure desire, yes, but also a vulnerability that completely disarmed me. We were 2 broken souls meeting. "This is crazy," I whispered, though I didn't want it to stop. "I know," he replied, his voice hoarse. And he kissed me again, silencing any doubt. The rain continued to beat on the roof, a perfect soundtrack for our clandestine encounter. The air smelled of wet earth and the electricity we gave off. His hands found the hem of my blouse. He hesitated for a moment, seeking permission in my eyes. I nodded almost imperceptibly. The decision was made. The contact of his rough skin against mine sent waves of pleasure through my entire body. It was real, it was happening. The soldier and the journalist, in an abandoned chapel. There were no words, only the universal language of desire, of need. Awkward movements at first, then more fluid, guided by primal instinct. We fell onto an old dusty wooden pew. The discomfort barely registered, overshadowed by the urgency of the moment. Our bodies seeking to merge. Each caress was a discovery, each kiss a silent promise of pleasure. The sound of our ragged breaths mingled with the incessant rain. I felt his body tense, a shared anticipation. Our eyes met again, one last conscious connection before diving completely into sensation. And then, the union. A choked gasp, a tremor running through both of us. It was like coming home to an unknown place, a contradiction made flesh. Rhythm found us, instinctive, primordial. The old pew creaked beneath our weight, a silent witness to our passionate transgression. Each thrust was an affirmation, a negation of everything else. Only his body next to mine existed, the heat, the friction, the raw, overwhelming pleasure. My usually analytical mind emptied. It was pure sensation, pure instinct. The journalist dissolved, leaving only the woman who longed to be touched, to be felt. The climax hit us almost in unison, a wave that swept us away and left us breathless, clinging to each other in the dusty dimness of the chapel. The silence that followed was dense, heavy with the unsaid. The rain had subsided, leaving only a rhythmic dripping from somewhere in the roof. I sat up slowly, adjusting my clothes with trembling hands. I avoided his gaze. Reality, with its weight and consequences, began to seep back in. Marco sat beside me, but maintained a small distance. He ran a hand through his hair, his jaw tight. Neither of us knew what to say. "Elena," he finally said, his voice soft. "I don't regret it." His words hung in the still air, a truth both simple and complicated. I turned to look at him. "Me neither, Marco. But this." I didn't finish the sentence. We both knew what this meant. A stolen moment, with no future. He nodded, his dark eyes mirroring my own melancholy. "I know." He reached out and brushed my ring with his fingertips. A gesture heavy with meaning. We dressed in silence, the air heavy with unsaid words and tacit decisions. The storm had passed, leaving behind a washed sky and an uncomfortable calm. We left the chapel. The fresh air smelled of wet earth and ozone. The sun began to peek through the clouds, painting the landscape in pastel tones. "I have to leave soon," he said, breaking the silence. "My leave is ending." It was the expected signal, the inevitable end of our brief story. I nodded. "I have to go back too. To my life." The word sounded hollow, strange on my lips after what had happened. There were no promises, no exchanged addresses. We knew this had been a parenthesis, a beautiful and painful anomaly in our ordered, or disordered lives. We looked at each other one last time. A long, deep look, trying to engrave every detail, every sensation. A wordless goodbye. He leaned down and gave me a chaste kiss on the forehead. An unexpected, tender gesture that broke me a little inside. "Take care, Elena." "You too, Marco." My voice was barely a whisper. I watched him turn and start down the hill, his figure shrinking against the vast landscape. I stayed there, alone again, with the smell of wet earth and the memory of his touch on my skin. The sun was shining brightly now, as if nothing had happened. I went back to my rental car, started the engine, and drove away from the vineyard. In the rearview mirror, I saw the rows of vines shrink, taking a shared secret with them. Tuscany was still beautiful, but now it had another layer of meaning, an invisible scar like the one above my eyebrow. A story I would never write. The ring was still on my finger, cold against my skin. I was returning to my life, to my duty. But a part of me stayed there, in that chapel, under the Tuscan storm. Perhaps, as Marco said, the best stories are the ones left untold. They are lived, felt, and kept in a corner of the heart, like a vintage, forbidden wine. The sun was setting as I drove, painting the sky in intense reds and oranges. A beautiful end to a day impossible to forget. A secret under the Tuscan sun. And as the lights of civilization began to flicker in the distance, I smiled sadly. I had found a story, yes. But it was mine. Only mine.